Hello, and welcome to the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast, the podcast redefining women's health one unfiltered conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jacqueline Rose, and every week we will sit down with leading women's health experts and real women to share their lived experiences, bust health myths, challenge outdated and uninformed narratives, and explore what's really possible for women. We'll explore the truth around women's health, from periods to fertility issues, menopause, hormones, and aging, and everything in between, while sharing practical, evidence informed strategies that you can use to feel more connected to your body, empowered in your choices, and confident at every stage of your life. This podcast is for every woman who felt confused, dismissed, or left out of her own health conversation. It is a space to celebrate women, break the silence, and open up an intergenerational conversation between mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and friends. Let's get started. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. Today, we have an excellent conversation. I am super, super excited about having this guest here joining me. I know we're going to be talking about some very controversial topics. We are going to be, as always, ruffling some feathers, busting some myths, opening up conversations around women's health and all things connected. So, Stasha, welcome. I'm so happy that you are joining me. Tell us a little bit about who you are, tell us what you do, and then we will start our conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely adore this podcast idea. I just genius. I love it. Thank you for doing it because every woman I know is like, gosh, I wish I had known this when I was a kid, right? So here you are doing such a
Exactly.
great service for all of us. I love it. I am the period coach. I am the founder of Period Coaching School, an internationally certified coaching institution. So we do menstrual cycle coaching as well as business and coaching training. So it's a real ball and host of Period Besties podcast, have a couple of books, including The Revolution Will Be Bloody and Bloody Brilliant Business, as well as a charting mandala book and the world's first period oracle card deck. So I'm a
Amazing.
big artist and fan of creating things, and of course, anything that makes the menstrual cycle more understandable, relatable, and usable, right? I'm nothing if not practical. Like I want you to walk away going, okay, this is going to make my life easier, better, all of those things. So I'm nothing if not
Amazing.
practical.
So let's start at the beginning. We know that a you become a woman, let's talk it like that, when you start your menstrual cycle. I know when I started my period, my mum said, Muzzle tov, you've now become a woman. And it was like, okay, like I was 12 or 13, and it was like so overwhelming. Obviously, that first time, the first bleed, you're embarrassed, you cry. I think every teenage girl cries when they start their first menstrual cycle. But there it is a milestone, and it is sort of entering into that sort of thing that is going to be with you for the next 25, 30 years. So let's sort of talk to us a bit about that beginning stage, about what that means, how girls, women engage with it, the things you want young women to know about that beginning waking up of their cycle.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would want women to know or young girls to know is that when they go to their doctor and say, "Hey, I've got my period," and their doctor goes, "Great, let's get you on birth control to regulate your hormones," they don't.
Yeah.
I hate that so very, very much because you're not allowing your body to function
Yeah.
at that point, right?
And
You're shutting down,
how many young teen girls are
right?
being put on the pill right at the early stages of their menstrual cycle?
Yeah, you never get your ovaries a chance to fire up, grow, mature, and become functional. So then going down off of birth control down the line, you're basically have pubescent ovaries. It's just, I really want that to stop. I'd really love to see. Yes, it's rocky to start. It's up, it's down, it's crazy. You skip months, you don't know what's coming. Absolutely. But there are ways to bring it into a more rhythmic cycle quicker, easier, right? Eating well, sleeping with the moon cycles, these just little things that can help bring the ovaries, say, online a little bit quicker and better, but without that chemical interference that just turns them off immediately.
And I
That's just,
think also the expectation that when you are a 13, 14, 15-year-old teen, it's going to be a 30-day cycle straight from the get-go. It's going to be regular. It's going to be smooth. It's going to be like that is also something we have to, mothers, in addition to the, here are your tampons, here are your sanitary towels, here are your whatever thing, what to expect in those early years.
yeah, absolutely. And getting to understand your own cycle, your own blood, what's happening. I would really love to see more young women who are entering in have that acceptance, that understanding, if they want to have some red velvet cake to celebrate, bring it on, but also to get some options for menstrual products that are not just disposable pads, which I think are probably the worst of all of the menstrual products.
Yeah.
So giving them more options as to what they want to use. And I know myself as a young person, when I first got my period, I didn't really want to go straight into tampons or anything, but to know now, like especially for moms, you may not know this, but menstrual products have come a long way. Cloth pads are not just rolled up washcloths anymore, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
amazing, amazing things. There's even companies that specifically make period underwear and those kinds of things for young girls,
Yeah.
even kids, right? 8, 9 year olds that are getting their periods and teens. So there's a lot more options now that are reusable. And when you think about the health ramifications and the environmental ramifications of those products, disposable versus renewables, you have this opportunity to really not only change the outcome for your kid, but also for the environment.
Yeah.
So it's a real win-win to
Yeah.
dive into those renewables right out of the gate.
Yeah. So, let's look at the ideal situation, the optimal situation for a young woman of sort of how you would like, how educate of how you would like to see her menstrual cycle. And then let's talk about what happens in reality with medical intervention, with pharmaceutical contraceptives, with other things. So let's sort of look at those two things that are happening. Let's talk about maybe the ideal situation and then what is happening in reality.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal situation is that you are charting, right? Which is one of the things that I love about the mandala. My moms use it with their kids before they start their periods,
Right.
and they adjust it to fit the kids. So, like, instead of the libido or the cervix, they might be tracking like family fun or, expressing gratitude or doing a good
Amazing.
deed for the day or something, right? But they're using it, and then all of my moms have reported back that their girls knew their cycles were coming because they could start to see this moods becoming cyclical, the fatigue becoming cyclical, the ovulation almost esque up extroverted energy becoming cyclical. So they could really see it becoming a pattern, and they were like, "Okay, we're getting close to that first period." So
It's
not only did
amazing. And you're developing these skills of
yeah,
body connection, body awareness at such a young age. It's so
exactly.
fantastic.
That's exactly the point. And then when they get their periods, they can continue that charting. So then you're a little less surprised by a period coming. You start to understand the signs and things that are happening for your body. Maybe you're not ovulating every time or whatever, things are real shaky, but you at least are a little less surprised. You are starting to understand that body connection. And then as things start to regulate over the course of the first few years, you really get that locked down and you can see what's going on. And then you also know, and this is one of those challenges with things like sugar and caffeine, because a lot of kids are on energy drinks and all this stuff, but you start to see how they affect your mood, your sleep, your digestion. And for girls to learn that at a younger age, I think makes such a huge impact throughout their whole lives.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's so amazing, especially because of still today, the ads that are out there for tampon use. I've talked about this for years and years about how, the ads are like unfortunately, the downside of the feminist movement and the introduction of the pill and those types of things, which we'll talk about in a minute, was that girls were being told, young women are being told that you got your period, it doesn't stop you. Put in a tampon, go swimming, ride a horse, wear your white jeans, go to the disco. I mean, how many tampon ads are there out there that represent this? Don't let your period stop you. And sometimes when you are listening to your cycle, when you are listening to your body, it shouldn't be a derogatory or a demoralizing or an anti-feminist statement to say, I'm on my period. I need something different now. I want to just stay home and, you know, stay in bed, wrapped up in my duvet. Like, that shouldn't be an anti feminist statement.
No, that's the thing about feminism, right? It's supposed to be all of the options are available to you. If you want to go horseback riding on your period and you feel great and you're one of God's 2 day long period chosen ones, fantastic. But if
Yeah.
you're the rest of us and you want to curl up on the couch and watch some movies, that should also be the option, right? That's the whole idea behind feminism is that everyone should be lifted together and everyone should be able to have their choice. Whatever they want should be appropriate and acceptable.
Yeah.
So if you want to stay home and relax, you should be able to stay home and relax.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get on to the conversation about the pill and medical intervention to help regulate for whatever reason, just tell me how you see the progression for women into their 20s and their 30s before we start talking about perimenopause, menopause, all these changes that happen to our menstrual cycle. What are you seeing with clients or mothers of for women in those peak reproductive years? And when I say reproductive fertility years, I'm not talking about it in a pejorative way of that means you're going to be having a child. It's more a biological stage that I'm referring to.
Yeah, ideally, you see a nice, easy flow that's consistent. The idea of your period coming every 28 days is a little mythological, but, within a
Thank you for
week,
saying
give or
that. Please repeat that, Stasha.
yeah, maybe before the Industrial Revolution, 28 days was the norm, but now, a 24-day period, a 30-day period, totally within the realm of norm. And even in one person, right? A 24-day, 230-day is absolutely considered a regular cycle.
Yeah,
Irregular would be way different, right? Irregular would be saying like you have a 19-day period one month and the next month you're 32 days or something. That you would think is more irregular. But
I will even push that 30 days if you let me to say even 32, 33 days, I think is still
yep.
within the range of normal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if your normal is, 28 days, but you get your period 24 days this month and then 30 days the next month, totally normal.
Yeah,
Or 32 days this month and 34 days the next month, totally normal. But whatever your normal is, and this is why charting is so important, so that
yeah,
you know what your normal is. And then you can see if something goes off or wacky and you can know. It's not just like, oh, I think it was different last month, but you actually know it's different.
yeah, yeah.
Also, it's not supposed to be painful. It's not supposed to be completely debilitating or exhausting. It's not supposed to be crazy pants making, right? So we obviously see a huge uptick in painful periods, dysmenorrhea, PMS, PMDD, endometriosis, all of these things, PCOS, because we have such a stressful, dysregulated, and of course, chemical laden world and environment these days. So we're seeing a lot of uptick on that kind of thing. And that's also where it's not a sentence. You can relieve symptoms, if not eliminate them. I like to say I have endometriosis, it's in remission, right? If I screw up and I go off my diet that I know works for me, if I do things that are off that, then I know it's going to be a painful period next month.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if I stay within the boundaries that I have realized work for me, then I lay in bed for a couple of days and I relax and it's all right. And it's not a big deal. Maybe
yeah,
I hop in the bathtub, but maybe it's fine. So it really is that place where we have to think of periods as not something that you're trying to cure, but something that you're trying to sync up and work and flow with and to use to your advantage to turn it into an asset instead of an obstacle.
I love that. I love that. And you can only do that when you are listening to your body, when you are tracking, when you are noticing what makes my PMS or period experience worse, and what makes it easier. And one thing I want to just clarify, because I started my journey in the world of yoga for women's health. And one of the things that we talked about is that the period, your bleed, is reflecting what happened in the month that has just gone by. We normally perceive our bleed, those menstrual days, as the start of the new month. So whatever is sort of happening here is sort of setting the tone for the rest of the month. And it's a perverse way of viewing it, because really our bleed is the release of everything that's just gone on the last 30 days. So I wonder if you can refer to that and relate to that, because I think
Yeah,
that helps us understand how it's showing up and why tracking what's gone on is so important to how you will experience that bleed time.
yeah, absolutely. It's almost like the that menstrual phase is like resetting to a blank slate for the next month. And there are certain things, follicles take about 90 to 100 days to regenerate. So sometimes it's 3 months down the line. You need to kind of keep that in mind. But if you're ovulating every month regularly, so follicles are working well, then you really are looking at that months of buildup into that menstrual phase. And so if you are stressed out and you're not taking care of yourself properly, if you're eating poorly, if you're pushing yourself too far, too much. One of my clients way back in the day was somebody who would get to their luteal phase, so maybe a week before her period, and she would just crash, just absolutely thought she was fat, ugly, miserable. She would stop eating. She would go work out like crazy. She would wonder why she was depressed, why she was couldn't get out of bed, why she felt so miserable and sick and bloated. And it was really, I was like, your prescription is to eat food and rest. That's your homework for your luteal phase, and it completely transformed. So it went from having borderline PMDD, frankly. I mean, I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose, but really depths of depression to, okay, this is part, okay, I need to take care of myself. I need to nurture myself. I need to actually treat myself like somebody I like.
Yeah.
And then it completely transformed her menstrual cycle. So really taking care of yourself throughout the month, eating all that good stuff, moving. I have the sensual system where I talk about all six senses and how they either are helping your hormones or hurting your hormones. There's
Yeah.
no in between in your hormonal health.
So explain that a
Wow.
little bit, because we normally know five senses. Explain what you mean by six senses, and just give us a little bit of an sort of an explanation about that understanding, and then we're still going to go back and talk about the pill. So don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely. So ideally, if you think about the menstrual cycle, I have 5 phases in my version of the menstrual cycle because again, practicality. This is what it actually feels like. This is actually how you use it in the real world day to day.
Yeah.
So if you're in that menstrual phase, you're in that winter phase, you're thinking about foods for winter, soups, stews, dark meats, dark beans, dark veggies, beets, seaweeds, right? Like
Yeah.
dark winter foods, warm things, nourishing things, really
Love
deeply
that.
nutritional things, right? Same with your sight and sound. You want less light, you want less noise. Maybe you love a good rock show, but in menstrual, you want maybe a nice like cafe jazz, right? Or just quiet bird song, nature.
Yeah.
So, what is that? What does bringing it in winter kind of feel? Touch movement, soft, gentle, warming, because again, thinking of that kind of winter modality, right? Spirit, introverted,
Yes.
quiet, reflective, meditative. If you're going to try a seated meditation, this might be the time to try it. Whereas an ovulation, summer, peak, not the time to sit down and try to meditate, right? So,
Yeah.
what are those winter things? So, when you're thinking all of your senses, smell, our oldest sense, the deepest sense, are you are the smells in your house abrasive, or are they feeling warm and nourishing? Cinnamons, pumpkin spices, spruce, winter, Christmassy
Right.
chocolate, right? So what are the smells around you? And again, all of your senses affect your hormones. So, you're in the menstrual phase where all of your hormones have just sort of leveled out. This is a really good time to set yourself up for the future
Right.
cycle. Follicular is spring, spring greens, fresh produce, bright colors, light greens, oranges, yellows, bright things, blueberries, just those bright kind of things, but also smell. I bet the candle that smelled abrasive in your menstrual phase, like maybe a lemongrass, smells amazing now.
Yeah.
But and now it smells like vibrant and energizing. And whereas before it was like, oh gosh, this feels like it's irritating me. Same with spirit, right? You're a little more extroverted. It's a great time to go out with friends. It's a great time to try new things. It's a great time to try group things. Really moving that forward, trying moving meditations, a little Tai Chi or something. So you're moving that kind of thing forward as
Right.
movement, sight, sound. Maybe it is time to move into the folk rock version now, or the rock and roll version of music. Turn on the brighter lights.
Yeah.
Ovulation, peak, summer, get out there, go play, go party, go to the rock concert, have a good time. And it's summer, it's spicy. So those spicy foods, or those really bright summery things, watermelons and bright foods, those kinds of things are really nourishing, arugulas, all that kind of stuff. And then early luteal, where you have that second wave of estrogen
Yeah.
bumping you up, so you still have some energy. It's a great time. You think about late summer where you're sitting on the front porch, you're having an iced tea, you're still batching, right? You're cooking, you're canning, you're still active, you're doing things up, but you're basically tying up the loose ends. You're
Right.
getting things canned to prepare for the fall and the winter.
Yeah.
You're getting things ready to go. So you're kind of tying up those loose ends, you're moving, you're shaking, but you are starting to turn more internal. So again, you may want to do those Tai Chis. Maybe you're not doing the HIIT workout now, but you may be moving on to like a regular yoga class instead of the advanced. You maybe go to the moderate yoga class this time.
Right.
And then you're moving into those winter foods where you're doing the harder squashes, or maybe you're doing some zucchini and some delicata squash, right? You're kind of moving between the summer and fall space. And then that deep luteal, those few days, maybe a week, maybe 4 or 5 days right before your period, your estrogen's declining, your progesterone's declining, you're really turning internal.
Yeah.
Now, you're not sitting on the front porch with a cup of iced tea enjoying the late afternoon. You're maybe sitting on the front porch, but with a cup of hot tea, you're moving inside, right? You're starting to move internal. So your foods, you're moving to the butternut squashes, the pumpkins. Your movement is moving more internal. Maybe it's time for the yin yoga class, the little more Tai Chi and Qigong for spirit meditation. Maybe you're still doing a little moving meditation, but it's not, maybe it's just that your hands are moving in a seated meditation instead of a prone or laying down meditation. Your sight and sound, again, you're starting to bring it down a notch. Maybe you're still listening to some music, but you're bringing it out of the rock into the folk or the music or the classical or something, right? You're bringing it down a notch. So you're really just ebbing and flowing with your cycle. And all of these things are to support those hormones that are happening in those phases,
Those
right? So
phases.
it's not just because it really is also because it supports your hormones. So then you
Yeah.
can go into having a much easier deep luteal phase, a much easier menstrual
Yeah.
phase.
I love that. And I love how you really talk about it being a full body experience. Because it is. And I think that one of the reasons why so many women have a challenge with their menstrual cycle is because we don't realize it's a full body experience. We think it's just about reproduction or our reproductive cycles. We don't realize that we really have to honor all those different elements that are going on, that are changing. Um, I think from here, I do actually want to go and ask you. Don't worry, I've got the pill written in big letters over here. It's like the anticipation. We're building anticipation for all those people listening, because I know that we're about to have a very big conversation about the pill. So hang on there, listeners. But as you've just explained optimal or ideal menstrual cycle, I want to ask you then how things do change as you get to perimenopause and menopause. Obviously, that is my wheelhouse: perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. And I want sort of to you to explain a little bit that we know that as our hormones start to fluctuate, our cycle starts to fluctuate and change. For many women, they may have potentially other menopause, perimenopause signs, even while still having regular ovulation, menstrual cycles. But base sort of, okay, I can say, great, we get the ideal, we understand, all everything that you've said about how the system works when it's working at its optimal best. But how do things change, and how would you talk about this in your language as we're navigating into perimenopause and menopause when things are changing? And then once that menstrual cycle stops and we lose that intimate, deep connection with our bodies, then what happens? Then sort of, what's available to us. And again, we're talking about women who are having regular menstrual cycles, where they know and they can see and they can track. Obviously, we're going to talk about those women where it's not so obvious. So we're just at the moment talking about that optimal pathway for the moment.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would like to myth bust is it's not puberty in reverse. It's your estrogen goes higher than it's ever been in your entire life in perimenopause. So you might be ovulating regularly because everything's working as normal, but your estrogen is like, I'm going off the charts today. See you later. Peace. Like, it is a little bit crazy pants in that way. So you can still be ovulating regularly, but you're starting to see things like mood swings are more dramatic than they used to be. Trouble sleeping when you never had trouble, waking up in the middle of the night when you never used to, anxiety is going through the roof, all that kind of stuff is happening. And your needs change. Your dietary needs change, the nutrition you need changes, the movement you need changes. Not to say that like doing weight training all your life is not a bad idea, but when you get into perimenopause, you really want to start doing that weight training if you haven't done it yet, right? So you're really starting to think of this reframe. And here's in The Revolution Will Be Bloody, I talked about how I think of menstrual cycles as basically training wheels for menopause.
Ooh, okay. Explain.
Theoretically, right? Theoretically, back in the day, we would have said that the wise women were no longer menstruating, but still
Yes.
living cyclically,
Yes.
right? They would have been the shining example in our community, our tribe, our village of what it means to not have a cycle, but still live in harmony with nature and the natural cycles, moon cycles, seasonal cycles, everything, right? They would have been the gold standard because they had menstrual cycles that enforced those natural cycles, right? They would have bled with the new moon, they would have ovulated with the full moon, even if they didn't know that that was happening. But that's why you see so many ancient traditions that had basically like sex orgies to celebrate the new moon every year, right? Or every month.
Right.
So you would see that that was an enforced cyclical rhythm in a way, not enforced in a bad way, but
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it was very
It was just
obvious.
what it was. It was just the natural way that
Right,
it was.
exactly. You're bleeding. It was obvious. There's no avoiding it. So it was that way. And then you would have seen the wise women who continued that tradition on. They would have continued to go to the red tent. They would have continued to mentor. They would have continued to do those things. So I always think of menstrual cycles as training wheels to continue living in cyclical harmony in menopause.
I love that.
Perimenopause is where you have to start figuring out how to transfer from your bleed to the moon cycles, to
I
the
love that.
seasonal cycles. And this is why I really like using the menstrual cycles as seasonal cycles every month so that you kind of continue that feeling into menopause. And so when you're in perimenopause and you're in that disruptive, which I'm in right now myself, I am like, woo, 19-day cycle, 33-day cycle. Ooh, I did not ovulate. Who knows what's going to happen? You have the moon cycles to anchor you
Right.
and to start seed cycling with the moon cycles, eating with the moon cycles, so that you have those anchors even as you are riding the waves of the chaos as you move
Love
into
that.
menopause.
Wow. I love that. I really love that. That's amazing. Okay. Let's talk about when things do not go the way that we would ideally like them to. And as you said, stress, our modern lifestyle, the food that we're eating, just that we are not in our circadian rhythm by any stretch of the imagination. Just modern living has created a reality where we are not, our bodies are not living and functioning at their most optimal. Um, no blame, shame, or guilt. It just is what it is. And then along come, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of these conditions, such as very bad PMS or PMDD, PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, going for months at a time without a bleed, even when there is no biological, rationale or reason for it. We all know it's stress related, probably, but and then fertility issues, women who are trying to get pregnant and then have challenges getting pregnant, even if they, I mean, again, we'll go back to the pill, but let's just say fertility challenges. So there is a long list of women's health, menstrual cycle, gynecological fertility challenges that come up. Many of these, I would, again, no blame, shame, or guilt. Many of these are not only reinforced and a result of lifestyle, stress, nutrition, inflammation, insulin resistance, etc., but the fact that many of us are put on the pill at very young ages. So talk to me a little bit about how you understand that and how you view that, and what really we want mothers, women, teens to know about this, because I know from my own daughter's experience, from, what's going on for my clients, the pill is still given today as the first line of medication treatment for any young woman of all ages who is dealing with any reproductive menstrual cycle fertility challenge. It is literally given out like candy still today. So talk to me a little bit about this, about sort of what you're seeing and how what we really need to know about this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. No blame or shame. You're in good company, right? 90% of us have a hormonal imbalance. We have some level of PMS or one of the other myriad of conditions that go along with things. So I mean, if if you're in the 10%, well done. But for the rest of us, you're in good company. So welcome. Yeah, I think a lot of them you can put into remission through natural means, but unfortunately, our doctors basically put us onto a hormonal birth control of some sort, and they call it regulating, except it's not
Yes, yes.
regulating.
I love that. I love that. We're going to put you on the pill to regulate your periods.
Yeah.
Explain why it's not regulating our periods.
Well, you're not getting a period. You're not ovulating. So you're
Thank
not getting
you.
a period. You're
Please
getting
stand
bleed.
up and shout it from the rooftops.
A withdrawal bleed will eventually end because it will only go on as long as you have a uterine lining that has built up back when you were still ovulating. So if you're younger, you'll lose your period sooner. If you're older, you might have a period for years until it finally drops off to nothingness. So it really is just a matter of how long you were ovulating before you ended up on the pill, before you end up no longer having a bleed. And in fact, when they created the pill, they debated because they said, oh, well, a woman is used to getting her period every month.
Mm.
We don't need to give her a period on the pill, but we should because it's what they're used to. And that's how you ended up with the sugar week on the pill because they just felt like it was part of a woman's natural state. So they added in, but you don't need to. You could just take the pill back to back to back to back to back to back to
And
back
so
with
many
never.
women do that. And so many
Right.
women do that.
Right. But unfortunately, that's you've shut down your ovaries. They generally shrink when you're on the pill because they're not being used. They're kind of dead. They shrivel up. You're not you're not getting any of the hormones that you need, right? You're not getting progesterone, which you only get if you ovulate. If you don't ovulate, you don't make progesterone. If you don't make progesterone in the short term, sleep, memory, digestion, gut biome, weight gain, stress, resilience, hair starts to get brittle, nails get brittle, skin gets gray, eyes get dull. All of these things go downhill. And in the long term, you're building no muscle mass, you're building no bone density, cardiovascular issues, the number one killer of women. Progesterone is a cardiovascular protectant hormone. You're not getting any of that. And then we wonder why we have early onset osteoporosis, extreme issues with osteoporosis. We wonder why we're having women dying of heart disease younger and with worsening conditioning because we have generations now of women who were on birth control for almost all of their fertile years and they got no progesterone, none of it. They got none of the protections that progesterone
So
offers you.
I love what you're saying here because I do want to connect it up a little bit to the menopause conversation because
Yeah.
bottom line is the pill is synthetic hormones. There is no bioidentical pill version.
Yeah.
And then along comes the HRT, the hormone replacement conversation, where we're like, God forbid you should go on synthetic HRT. And I'm not in favor of synthetic HRT. I don't have an issue with HRT in general, but synthetic HRT, obviously, we know it is not healthy and not great for you. But women will, and doctors will not allow their patients anywhere near any type of HRT, despite the fact that they've been prescribing the pill to their patients for 25 years. And the dichotomy between understanding that synthetic HRT is cancer causing and is a no-no and you shouldn't go anywhere near HRT, and HRT has all these different risks in the old narrative. Now I know it's changing, but yet giving the pill out like candy, it's such a dissonance. It's so medically inappropriate and just malicious in so many ways.
Yeah.
um, and I love what you're saying about the health implications of long-term oral contraceptive pill use. Because when it does come to the menopause and post-menopause conversation around health and wellness and as we all know, bones, brain, heart health is the big conversation in post-menopause. And we can talk about that in a minute about, especially for women, we want to protect our bones, brain, and heart. And the only way of doing that is supporting our health with some type of hormone replacement. But has there been any research done of these women who experience, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, or Alzheimer's, and looking at their contraceptive pill use? Has there
Wouldn't
been
that be
any research done in the medication that they were on prior to menopause, rather than saying you've got to go on HRT to protect your bones, brain, and heart? Because if you don't go on HRT, you're going to have, die of a heart attack and, fall down and break your pelvis and, have early onset dementia. But no one is asking about what's gone on in the previous 35 years of their health story.
And ironically, there was a study that was looking into that, and the current administration pulled the plug. So there was like 20 years of data that they were working with that's gone. They can't even touch it now because all the funding and everything's been pulled. So we almost had a new study to show us all that kind of stuff, and it is gone now. And I mean, hopefully we'll get it back at some point, but not anytime soon. And yeah, that you can also blame the media, unfortunately, for that study back in the day, because when they talked about HRT 20 years ago, when that study first was published, they had different branches. They had estrogen only,
Yeah,
progesterone only, and then they had progestin, which is what is in hormonal birth control and is also in some HRT.
yeah,
And progestin is the one, it's the synthetic that causes the cancers and the
all the
issues and
problems.
everything. But that's the only thing that the headlines spread is HRT causes cancer. Not that there were like several arms to the study, not that there was only one component that increased the chances of cancer,
Yeah,
just that HRT causes cancer. So, but
yeah,
that's what's in your birth control. And why are we not putting that together? Why are we not saying, oh, well, that's the same thing?
yeah,
And why are we giving birth control away when we could be doing so many other things?
yeah,
First of all, you're only fertile for about 6 days a month, and yet somehow you have to be on this thing 24/7.
yeah.
Also, when you're young, you should be using some kind of condom because hello, STIs in this day and age, right? They're not getting any better or more treatable, frankly. So some are, but not all. Anyway, so really, if when you're young, you should be using a barrier method like a condom just to prevent from STIs. And then when you're in a relationship, there's so you can chart, you can cycle, you can diaphragms are not what they used to be either. You can get diaphragms that are literally made for your body.
Yeah.
There's so many other options now that I mean, I love the pill. It's useful in certain situations. I'm an endometriosis person. I absolutely have seen women who had no other option and they found a birth control that worked for them and it
Yes.
reduced their pain. Like it should be used, but it should be used in the same way that we think of surgery as the last resort, as the final, choice, as the, okay, look, but here's how are we going to live on the birth control pill without it making so many things worse? Like, do you know that the birth control pill reduces the microbiome in the gut? So if you're taking birth control, you really need to be having your ferments with every meal, right? Like, just what are the ways that you can make it safer for you to use as well? Like, they're just, I love it. It did so much for women's lib. It gave us so much more control over our bodies and our lives and our outcomes, and we can make it better.
Yeah. So I want to put a big disclaimer here because I'm sure there are going to be women yelling down their earpods or yelling through the screen, you're anti-feminist and you're not pro women's rights and you're not this and you're not that. I want to just add two disclaimers here. I will speak on your behalf, Stasha, because I'm sure that you agree with me. I am not anti HRT. I am
Yep.
not anti the pill. They
Nope.
each have their treatment
Yep.
pathways, they are valid treatment pathways. I am, however, pro being informed, making educated decisions, being connected to your body, and making the right decision for you given your health story. What I am very much against is doctors giving out the pill or doctors refusing to give out HRT when there is no real valid reason for it. So when we said earlier, the pill is given for any and every menstrual cycle problem, any and every reproductive fertility issue, and also acne and things like that, it's given out for. The pill should not be a one size fits all magic solution for any women's health challenge. That is what I am against. There are valid times and situations where it can be life saving. And I think that we just need to make sure that women listening, and for women, mothers out there who are talking to their daughters, that is the message that I'm passionate about. And I'm sure you are too. Make informed, educated choices and decisions. Don't just say, well, this is what my doctor's given me, this is what is available, and this is what we're just going to go ahead and do.
Yeah, 100%. When Ricky Lake was making the business of birth control,
Thank you for mentioning that.
right? I was a sponsor for the movie, and it was one of the things that we kept coming back to over and over again was like, I don't want this to come off as like anti-feminism or anti-women's lib or any of that stuff. However, we don't have the information. We're not getting told all of the things, and
Yeah,
there's not a lot of studies either. So we're flying blind and no one cares.
yeah,
That's the conversation. And I know the internet does not do nuance well, but this is a nuanced conversation, and there is absolutely time and a place for it. There's a need for it, but it also could be better. It could just be better. It's like everything in medicine. It could be better. Why
yeah,
are we not striving for better just because it affects women?
yeah.
We strive for better erectile dysfunction medicines. There's more studies on
Yeah.
men's hair loss than there is on endometriosis, which is a crippling disease. But
I
we
heard
don't
a
care.
fascinating statistic. In Australia, there are nine recommended approved testosterone medication for men, and there is one approved testosterone medication for women.
Yeah.
And we know that testosterone as a hormone replacement is probably I believe it is the first stop for women who are struggling during perimenopause and menopause before they even look at estrogen, before they even look at progesterone. I firmly believe that testosterone is the unsung hero of women's health. 9 approved for men and 1 approved for women. And that's exactly that's the story here.
Yeah. And ironically, Australia actually does better and more research into women's health than the US does. And that's where they're at. So that's really saying something.
Because you brought up the documentary, The Business of Birth Control, just tell us a little bit about that. It is a must watch for every single woman out there. Tell us a little bit about what that documentary is sharing as we begin to close up our conversation.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating movie. They basically there's a huge gap in what we're being told as almost all of us are being put on birth control when we get our first, oh, you have a period, you need to be on birth control immediately. No rhyme, reason, need, nothing, just immediately put onto it. And so they essentially went, okay, well, let's look into this. And they interviewed women, and then they realized how many women were dying or having these things that you can't do anything about down the line, issues
Yeah.
coming up. So they really dove into the subject and tackled it. And it's a tough subject to have a
Tough
conversation
subject.
of. And I think they did a really good job of talking about the downsides of birth control, the realities, what we're not being told about birth control, and then what are the alternatives? What are some of the things that you can do instead? I think they did a really good job of it. It's
Yeah.
very eye-opening,
Yeah.
especially if you've never heard any of the stuff before. And it's something that I recommend. I mean, I sponsored it for God's sakes. Like I'm in, it's a good movie. Go watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've seen it. It is, I think women can be a bit freaked out by it because
Yeah.
we're not having the conversation about the potential risks of being on the pill. As we said, doctors don't ever share that information, they just give it out. And we're not here to scaremonger. We want you to be informed.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
Yeah.
Before I ask my last closing question, anything else that you really want to share, that you really want to, knowledge that you want to impart, anything that we haven't talked about that you just want to make sure that people know?
Oh, I think if I had a soapbox and I could only do one thing on that soapbox, I would just say over and over and over again, ovulation is critical to your health in both the short term and the long term. Ovulate. Make sure you're ovulating. Track your ovulation. Track your cervical mucus. Track your basal body temperature. Confirm your ovulation. And it is not just to make babies. It is every part, your cycle is involved in everything in your entire body, your digestion, your sleep, your building, everything. And if you're not ovulating, you're not getting that full whole body mental, emotional, physical health. So if I could just tell everyone to track their ovulation religiously, that would be it.
I think that's really important because I think people only really, specifically women, only really relate to ovulation in their need to get pregnant. And I think what you're saying is so powerful. Ovulation is not only about getting pregnant, it is about our holistic, whole body women's health experience.
Yeah, 100%. I've not had kids. I'm 40, well, they'll be 45 very soon. I'm never having kids, but I track my ovulation religiously, and everyone should. It's having children is like the lowest on the list of reasons that ovulation is important. Ovulate. Make sure you're ovulating. Track it. Be
Amazing.
passionate about it.
So fascinating. Okay. The question I'm asking everyone as we close up the interview is what do you want I know what I want my daughters to know, but what do you want your daughters, nieces, goddaughters, next generation females? What do you want them to know?
Their relationship with their cycle should be a good, healthy relationship. And I would love to. I would love them to see it as an asset. It's something that I write about in all of my books, how to use your cycle as an asset, how to use every phase for its particular power, how those hormones change what's going on in your body and how to use it for your advantage. I would just love, love, love these generations that are coming next to see their cycle as an advantageous friend and make peace with it. And I say this as somebody who had such painful periods. I wanted to kill myself very literally, very much suicidal because they were so painful.
Mhm.
And yet I have found a way to put that into remission and to change the relationship with my cycle. So I'm saying this as somebody who knows
Yeah.
what it's like to be on the wrong end of the period stick. So if I can do it, you can do it. And I would really love to see that relationship changed in the generations to come from foe to friend, from obstacle to asset to a really nurturing, coexisting relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very powerful message to end our conversation with. I want to thank you for joining me. This has really been so fascinating and definitely things that the next generation of women need to be listening to. So, thank you for joining me. I have loved every minute of speaking to you. Um, People can reach you where?
I'm on all of the socials at Stasha Washburn, and I have theperiodcoach.com, which has my books and period stuff, and then periodcoachingschool.com for the certifications if you want to take it to the next level.
Amazing. Thank you for joining me, Stasha. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. Please reach out to me if you have anything that you want to add. Reach out to Stasha. Her details will be in the show notes. And join me next time for another fascinating conversation at the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. Have a great day.